What happens when the ordinary turns extraordinary in the blink of an eye? In the bustling atmosphere of a popular Washington, D.C. museum, filled with the hum of curious visitors and the soft echoes of history whispered from every corner, we find our protagonist, James Clark, a middle-aged African-American history teacher with a passion for politics and social justice. James, humble and wise, is visiting the museum on a quiet Tuesday morning to gather resources for his upcoming classes. As he stands before an exhibit on presidential histories, deeply engrossed in his notes, a loud, disdainful voice cuts through the murmur of the crowd. A tourist, evidently displeased and looking to stir trouble, begins making disrespectful comments about the figures in the exhibit, particularly targeting a display featuring former President Barack Obama. Unaware that he is addressing a room with varied political views and sentiments, the tourist loudly exclaims, "Can you believe this guy was ever our president? What a joke!" James, overhearing this, feels a twinge of annoyance but chooses to stay focused on his research, believing it best not to engage. Yet, the tourist, noticing James's attentiveness to the exhibit, turns his scorn towards him. "Hey, you agree with me, right? These glorified displays are rewriting history." Caught in a moment that demands a response, James faces a dilemma. Does he confront the ignorance head-on, or does he preserve the peace of the educational space? His choice and the unfolding events will not only test his convictions, but will also lead to an unexpected turn that leaves everyone around them speechlessly reflecting on their own beliefs. The confrontation, although uncomfortable, sets the stage for a profound demonstration of wisdom and patience that resonates deeply with everyone who witnesses it. The tension in the air thickens. James takes a deep breath, steadying himself before he turns to face the tourist. His voice is calm, yet firm as he addresses the man's harsh words. "I believe everyone is entitled to their opinion," James begins, "but disrespecting figures in a public museum may not be the best way to express it. Perhaps there's more to learn about each person's contributions before making such judgments." The tourist scoffs, unprepared for a reasoned debate, but intrigued enough to engage. "Oh, really? And what could you possibly tell me that would change my mind about him?" Seizing the opportunity, James leads the tourist away from the crowd, suggesting a quieter spot near another exhibit. "Let's talk about leadership and legacy," James proposes, gesturing to the displays of various leaders. As they walk, James shares anecdotes about Obama's policies and leadership style, focusing not just on achievements but on the challenges and compromises that marked his presidency. The conversation grows, attracting a small group of listeners who add their perspectives to the discourse. What unfolds next is a vibrant exchange of ideas and viewpoints. James listens attentively, responding thoughtfully to questions and comments from the growing audience. His approach is not to overpower or to convert, but to enlighten and open pathways for understanding and respect. The tourist, initially combative, begins to soften as the discussion reveals layers of political and social complexities he had not considered. As they converse, a young student interrupts, eager to contribute. "Isn't it true that real change comes from understanding all sides?" she asks, her voice hopeful. James nods, pleased to see younger generations engaging thoughtfully with their history. The impromptu discussion culminates with the tourist reflecting on his earlier comments. "I suppose there's more to think about than just what meets the eye or what the media often portrays." "Thanks for keeping it civil," he admits, extending a hand to James. The handshake, simple yet meaningful, symbolizes not just a resolution to their conflict, but a mutual acknowledgement of respect and the importance of dialogue. As the crowd disperses, James remains behind, contemplating the unexpected turn of events that transformed a potential confrontation into a lesson in empathy and understanding. He realizes that his role as an educator extends beyond the classroom. It permeates every interaction in his life, reinforcing the value of patience, knowledge, and respect in shaping opinions and fostering dialogue. As James stood there, watching the crowd disperse, he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. But just as he turned back to the exhibit, the tourist lingered a few steps away, his face etched with a strange mix of curiosity and regret. "Hey," the man called out, his voice softer this time. "You've got away with words. You didn't get defensive or angry, and somehow, you got me thinking. How do you do that?" James smiled, a kind and knowing expression. "It's not about winning an argument," he said. "It's about finding common ground. Sometimes, all it takes is listening, even when it's hard to do. People don't always realize how powerful understanding can be." The man nodded slowly, his defenses further crumbling. "You know, I've always judged people like him. Maybe it's because of what I've been told my whole life, or the circles I grew up in. It's like I've never stopped to think for myself. Maybe I was just looking for someone to validate my own bias." James placed a hand on the man's shoulder briefly, a gesture of encouragement. "The fact that you're questioning it now, that takes courage. Most people are too afraid to even consider another perspective." At that moment, a museum employee approached, a smile lighting up her face. "Excuse me," she said, "I couldn't help but overhear parts of your conversation. It's rare to see strangers engage in such a meaningful way, especially on such a heated topic. Would you mind if I shared this story with my team? We could use more examples like this for our programs about fostering constructive dialogue." James glanced at the man, silently asking for his consent. The man hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "Why not? Maybe others can learn from it, too." The employee beamed. "Thank you. It's refreshing to see this kind of exchange here. This museum is meant to spark conversations, after all." As she walked away, the man turned back to James, his expression lighter than it had been all morning. "I'm Mark, by the way. I never introduced myself. And for what it's worth, I think you've changed my day." James chuckled softly, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Mark. I'm James. And if a conversation changed your day, maybe it can change more than that." Mark grinned faintly, shaking his hand. "Guess I'll start by rethinking a few things. Thanks for not giving up on the conversation." As Mark walked away, James felt a deeper sense of purpose settle over him. He knew he hadn't just diffused a tense moment. He'd sparked a ripple of change, however small it might seem. For James, it was a reminder that the smallest moments of understanding could lead to the biggest transformations. James watched Mark walk away, a new lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. Reflecting on the encounter, James knew that the day had unfolded in a way he hadn't anticipated when he walked into the museum that morning. He gathered his notes and prepared to leave, but his thoughts were far from the papers in his hands. Today had reinforced a vital lesson. The power of dialogue and the impact of staying open to others' views could extend far beyond a museum's walls. As he exited the building, James felt a profound sense of commitment to carry this experience into his classroom and beyond. He pondered on how to incorporate today's lessons into his teaching methods. How can I help my students not just learn about history, but also learn from it, he mused. How can I inspire them to seek understanding rather than division? The following week, James decided to share the museum incident with his class. He described the encounter, careful to highlight the importance of open dialogue and the personal reflections it had prompted. The students listened intently, and soon the room buzzed with questions and comments. James facilitated the discussion, allowing each student to express their thoughts and encouraging them to consider different perspectives. The impact of James's story extended beyond the classroom. Inspired by the discussion, one of his students, Sarah, proposed a school project focused on community dialogue. What if we hosted a series of talks where people from different backgrounds could share their experiences and views? She suggested excitedly. James supported the idea wholeheartedly, and together with his students, they began organizing the event. Months later, the Community Dialogue series had become a cherished part of the local calendar. People from various parts of the city came to listen and participate. The forums provided a safe space for respectful conversation and helped bridge gaps between diverse community members. James often thought back to his discussion with Mark, grateful for the unexpected confrontation that had led to such a meaningful outcome. In his reflection, James realized that his encounter at the museum wasn't just about changing one man's mind. It was about setting off a chain reaction of understanding and respect. Who knew that a day at the museum would turn into this? He often remarked with a smile. This experience had not only enriched his own life, but also empowered those around him to create positive change in their communities. As he prepared for another community forum, James felt energized and hopeful. The dialogue series had taught him that change often begins with a single conversation, a simple question, or even a moment of patience. It was a lesson he planned to carry forward, always remembering that every interaction holds the potential for something much larger than the moment itself. James stood at the back of the crowded community center, his eyes scanning the lively faces that filled the room. Each forum seemed to grow larger, drawing in people from all walks of life, eager to share and learn from each other. Tonight was no different. As he watched a panel of speakers discuss the importance of cultural awareness, he felt a deep satisfaction knowing that these conversations were fostering a spirit of community and understanding. The discussion wrapped up, and the floor opened for questions. A young woman stood up, her voice steady and clear. How can we ensure that these dialogues continue to make a real impact in our community? How do we move from talking to action? She asked. James listened intently as the panelists offered their thoughts, emphasizing collaborative projects and ongoing engagement. After the session, he approached the woman. "Your question was very important," he began. "It's the next step for all of us here." The woman, named Clara, nodded, her eyes reflecting a passion for making a difference. "I've seen too many of these talks fade away without real change," she said. "I want to be part of something that lasts, that actually makes a difference." Inspired by Clara's fervor, James suggested they collaborate on a new initiative. What about starting a community action group? We could focus on specific projects that address the issues we've been discussing here. We could use this forum as a springboard for real, tangible change. Clara's face lit up with enthusiasm. "I love that idea. Let's do it. Where do we start?" Over the next few weeks, James and Clara worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork for the Community Action Group. They met with local leaders, gathered a team of dedicated volunteers, and set a plan in motion to tackle their first project, creating a multicultural community garden designed to not only beautify the neighborhood, but also to serve as a gathering place for cultural exchange and education. The garden project kicked off with a community planting day. Families brought their children, students came with their friends, and elderly residents watched with smiles as the garden took shape. Each plant, each flower bed held significance, representing the diverse cultures of the community. It was a place of growth in more than one sense, a living symbol of the community's commitment to understanding and respecting each other's backgrounds. As the garden blossomed, so did the relationships among its caretakers. The garden became a venue for cultural festivals, educational workshops, and social gatherings. It was a testament to what could be achieved when a community came together united by a common goal. James often found himself in the garden, tending to the plants or simply enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Reflecting on the journey from that initial confrontation in the museum to this thriving garden, he realized the profound impact of patience and dialogue. It had not only changed Mark's perspective that day, but had also ignited a chain of events that transformed the entire community. In his heart, James knew that the seeds planted here, both literal and metaphorical, would continue to grow, spreading their roots deep into the fabric of the community. The garden was more than just a place. It was a promise of ongoing dialogue, understanding, and respect, a legacy that would flourish for generations to come.